Jamaica woke up beneath a heavy sky, the kind of sky our elders say arrives when truth is walking toward a nation. Across Kingston, from Spanish Town to the hills of St. Andrew, radios hummed with a single question. What did Captain Traoré see that we did not see ourselves? And across the Atlantic, in living rooms from Atlanta to Baltimore, African-American elders 60 years old and older leaned closer to their screens, sensing that something long hidden was finally coming to light. For this was not merely political noise. This was a tremor reaching deep into Black memory, stirring feelings older than our passports, older than our borders, older even than our broken histories. Family, the story you are about to hear is layered with dignity, betrayal, awakening, and the quiet strength of people who have been tested before. And before we walk into the heart of it, let me speak plainly. Preacher to pew. If you believe in truth told without fear, in sovereignty guarded without apology, in Black nations rising without permission, then make sure you subscribe and stay with this channel. Because what is coming next will test the courage of Jamaica itself in the days ahead. Jamaica did not expect the spark to come from Ouagadougou. It did not expect that a single sentence, spoken thousands of miles away, would travel across the Atlantic faster than any diplomat, faster than any press release, faster even than the whispers that usually run ahead of politics. Yet that is what happened when Captain Ibrahim Traoré, standing beneath the sun of Burkina Faso, spoke words that cut through the noise and landed directly in the heart of the Caribbean. He did not mention Jamaica by name. He did not point a finger. But he said enough. Enough for newspapers across the region to ask, is he talking about us? Enough for elders in Portmore to pause mid-conversation. Enough for analysts in Kingston to begin searching through old files and sealed archives. Because when a leader speaks of a foreign contract hidden from the people, and when he speaks with fire in his voice, every nation with secrets begins to tremble a little. At first, the reaction was cautious. The office of Prime Minister Andrew Holness issued a brief statement. Opposition leader Mark Golding said the matter required clarity. Former Minister Nigel Clark commented that nothing appeared unusual in the government's records. Yet beneath those official tones lay something unsaid. A quiet anxiety that Jamaica might indeed be the country alluded to. It was former Prime Minister Portia Simpson Miller, now retired from frontline politics, who first voiced what the public was whispering. In a brief television interview, she said, "When a foreign leader speaks about hidden arrangements, every government should check its own drawers." And those words, spoken softly, opened the door to everything that followed. Because that is when journalists began digging. One newspaper in Kingston, name withheld because the investigation is still unfolding, reported that it had received copies of an older agreement involving a foreign conglomerate. The year was redacted, the sector was redacted, several names were redacted, but 3 lines were clear. 10-year exclusive access, strategic land zone. Details not subject to public disclosure. Family, that is when the island started to murmur. Was this the contract Traoré was hinting at? Was Jamaica the nation in the shadows of his speech? Or was the timing simply coincidence? No one could say for certain. And because no one could say for certain, the question grew louder. The House of Representatives attempted to calm the public, but to little effect. A small group of parliamentarians led, on different days, by voices rotating between Holness, Golding, Clark, and Bruce Golding, requested a confidential review of all foreign agreements signed in the last 15 or 20 years. That request alone was enough to convince many that something was indeed amiss. Then came the murmurs inside ministries. Former civil servants, speaking anonymously, hinted that certain memoranda had been kept off the public books for reasons labeled national strategy. But they did not say more. They did not need to. Once the scent of secrecy enters the air, the people know how to follow it. Inside the diaspora in the United States, elders recognized a familiar pattern. They remembered the days when deals were made above their heads, when communities were told only what leaders wanted them to hear. They called this moment, this sudden awakening, the Ibrahim Traoré moment, the instant when someone far away dared to shine light on the corners others preferred to keep in shadow. Churches in Jamaica spoke about it during Wednesday night services. Pastors reminded congregations that truth does not fear daylight. Seniors gathered in front yards, shaking their heads, wondering why every possible answer from officials felt like another question. Meanwhile, the documents that had surfaced, though incomplete, though heavily redacted, raised suspicion precisely because of what they did not reveal. One legal expert from the University of the West Indies said on national radio, "If the contract is harmless, publish it. If it is beneficial, defend it. If it is secret, explain why." Silence does not guide a nation, but silence persisted. Some Jamaicans defended the government, arguing that strategic agreements often require confidentiality. Others insisted that the Caribbean had suffered too long from hidden pen strokes on foreign paper. They argued that Jamaica, a country built on resilience and courage, deserved transparency, especially when land, resources, or sovereignty might be involved. For a moment, it seemed the debate might pass, that the government would stand firm, that the public would move on. But then a second leak appeared, this time not in the newspaper, but on social media. An unnamed source posted an image of a single page, containing only two visible details: foreign jurisdiction and renewal clause. Still no dates, still no names, still no context. But that page was enough to ignite suspicion into flame. By the end of the week, Jamaica had shifted from quiet curiosity to restless questioning. Radio hosts opened their lines to callers. Elders spoke with both anger and sorrow, and analysts across the Caribbean began to wonder whether this was not simply a domestic issue, but a symptom of something deeper in the region's political culture. Family, every story has a beginning. Every investigation starts with one crack in the wall, and Jamaica had just discovered its crack. And yet what came next was far more explosive than anything revealed so far. Because when Jamaica finally traced the leak back to its source, the island discovered that the truth was not only hidden, it had been hidden deliberately. The real storm did not begin with the documents. It began with the source. When investigators quietly traced the leak back to a former mid-level advisor, someone who had served under both the Holness administration and, years earlier, the Portia Simpson Miller government, the political landscape of Jamaica shifted overnight. The advisor, whose identity remains sealed by legal order, reportedly told journalists, "The public was never meant to see any of it." A single sentence, whispered into the ear of a reporter, traveled across the island like rolling thunder. By morning, radio stations in Kingston were caught in a whirlwind. Broadcasters struggled to remain neutral while callers unleashed decades of frustration. One elderly woman from Clarendon declared, trembling, "We cannot be free if our own leaders hide the truth from us." A veteran from St. Catherine said, "If the contract is clean, show it. If it is dirty, own it." And with every call, every heated comment, every quivering voice of an elder who had lived through hurricanes, elections, and broken promises, the pressure grew heavier upon the government. Inside Gordon House, tension thickened like humid air before a tropical storm. Prime Minister Andrew Holness attempted to restore order, urging Jamaicans to remain calm. But calm was in short supply. Opposition leader Mark Golding demanded a full public audit. Former Minister Nigel Clark argued that economic stability depended on confidentiality. And then Bruce Golding, usually measured, raised his voice and declared, "What is hidden in darkness must face the judgment of daylight." Those words shook the chamber. Members pounded their desks, tempers flared, microphones picked up muttered insults. A few parliamentarians walked out. Journalists swarmed the corridors. The speaker struggled to maintain discipline, calling repeatedly for order, but order refused to come. For the first time in years, Jamaica's parliament felt as though it were standing on an emotional fault line. And all the while, the people saw everything. Nighttime news carried footage of the chaos. Elders across the diaspora, especially African Americans who had lived through the civil rights era, recognized the energy immediately. It was the energy of a nation confronting itself, its past, its pride, its pain. Churches felt it too. In Montego Bay, a pastor paused mid-sermon and said, "When truth knocks, even governments tremble." His congregation applauded. In Mandeville, a Sabbath service turned into an open forum on national integrity. Elders wept openly, ashamed that their beloved island might have been tied to a foreign arrangement without their knowledge or consent. Meanwhile, the international press began circling. Caribbean newspapers debated whether Jamaica was being unfairly targeted. American analysts speculated on the geopolitical implications. African commentators questioned whether small Caribbean nations were being pressured by unseen external powers. In this rising wave of noise, a second event pushed the tension to breaking point. The footage from Burkina Faso resurfaced. The moment was replayed online, on television, in WhatsApp groups, in commentary channels from Lagos to London. It was the Ibrahim Traoré reaction. The clip in which Captain Traoré, responding to a journalist, spoke of certain islands being pressured into agreements that weakened their sovereignty. His eyes did not waver, his tone did not soften, and his words echoed like a hammer. Elders in the diaspora watched the clip again and again. Some nodded solemnly, others felt a chill down their spine. A few whispered, "He is speaking to us." Suddenly, Jamaica was no longer dealing with its own leak. It was dealing with the global conversation that followed it. Caribbean commentators accused Traoré of meddling. African commentators praised him for courage. American commentators reframed the matter as a test of transparency. And within Jamaica, something extraordinary happened. People who had once disagreed on everything, politics, religion, party colors, generational visions, began to unite behind a single demand. Open the contract. The streets did not fill with protesters, but the air carried the same electricity as if they had. Supermarkets buzzed with debate. Taxi drivers argued fiercely at stoplights. University students launched petitions. Retired teachers gathered beneath almond trees to discuss economic implications. And in parish after parish, the conversation grew sharper, more urgent, more impossible for the government to ignore. Yet the administration remained cautious. Some documents were reviewed internally, but none released publicly. Statements were issued, but they raised more questions than they settled. Government spokespeople appeared on television, but their explanations felt incomplete. Each sentence seemed to hold back something unsaid, something fragile, something combustible. Then another leak appeared. Anonymous, unverified, but deeply troubling. It suggested that the foreign conglomerate might have had the power to influence land zoning in Jamaica. 3 words: land, access, transfer appeared in faint print beneath layers of redaction. And those 3 words were enough to turn suspicion into alarm. Jamaica's elders remembered how their parents fought for land. They remembered the struggles of post-independence survival. They remembered how easily power could slip through the fingers of a small nation. When those memories awakened, anger awakened with them. Diaspora seniors in the United States also felt it. They wrote letters. They filmed commentary. They reminded younger generations that sovereignty, once lost, is not easily regained. And in the middle of the storm, a single question echoed louder than any other. If this contract is harmless, why does it hide so fiercely? Family, Jamaica was standing on the threshold of revelation. The island had reached the edge of its patience. The people were ready to demand answers, and the government, under pressure on all sides, could no longer escape the inevitable. Because when the final sealed envelope was opened, the silence inside Gordon House was louder than any protest outside it. When the final envelope was opened, Jamaica held its breath. Not the noisy breath of protest, not the fiery breath of outrage, but the still, trembling breath of a people who know that truth, when it finally arrives, can wound as deeply as it heals. Inside Gordon House, members of Parliament stared at the revealed page in a stunned silence that cameras could not capture and microphones could not translate. Outside, the island waited. The document did not name a company, nor did it clearly outline the full scope of the agreement, but one sentence stood like a mountain in the fog. Exclusive rights involving strategic land assets may be determined in consultation with the foreign jurisdiction. Those words struck the nation like a blow to the chest. Land, the ancestral ground, the soil that carried the sweat of slaves, the prayers of grandmothers, the hope of generations. And now the people were learning, perhaps too late, perhaps just in time, that some portion of their inheritance might have been negotiated without their knowledge. It was in that moment that Jamaica's elders felt anger tighten into grief. A retired schoolteacher from St. Anne told a local radio station, with tears in her voice, "My mother died believing land was the only thing our people still controlled. Now even that may not be ours?" Others phoned in, speaking brokenly of memories farming with their fathers, building houses board by board, burying loved ones beneath mango trees. Every story carried the same sorrow. Land was not simply property, it was identity, lineage, survival. Economists warned of the potential consequences: foreign oversight, strategic vulnerability, diminished autonomy. Social commentators spoke of betrayal. A professor from the University of the West Indies explained that such agreements, if mishandled, could weaken Jamaica's long-term economic footing. When a nation signs away advisory control of its land, he said, it signs away a piece of its soul. Diaspora communities in the United States also felt the shock. Elder African Americans who had followed the story from the beginning recognized immediately what was unfolding. They remembered how cities across America lost land through redevelopment schemes and policy loopholes. They saw echoes of Harlem, of New Orleans, of Detroit communities uprooted not by storms, but by contracts. And they said, almost in unison, "This is another Ibrahim Traoré moment, when someone speaks truth, and the system finally trembles." But family, anger, and sorrow did not stand alone. Jamaica is a nation trained by hardship, strengthened by storms, shaped by survival. After the grieving came a new voice, soft at first, then clearer, then unmistakably strong. It began in community centers where elders asked, "What can we do next?" It rose in universities, where students called for full transparency of all foreign contracts signed since independence. It echoed in churches, where pastors reminded congregations that redemption is not a theory, it is a path, and every nation has the right to walk it. One church in Spanish Town held a special evening service called The Gathering for Light. Men and women over 60 filled the pews, candles were lit, and a pastor, voice deep as the ocean at night, said, "We were not created to live in darkness. We were created to see." Those gathered responded with a long, slow murmur of agreement, the kind of sound that carries both pain and determination. Diaspora elders in New York organized a virtual town hall. Grandmothers from Chicago joined. Retired veterans from Florida spoke of sovereignty, dignity, and the responsibility of leaders to serve with honesty. Some participants wept. Others offered solutions. All of them insisted that the Caribbean must rebuild trust through truth. Jamaica's domestic reaction began shifting too. Newspapers demanded full disclosure. Some politicians softened their tone. Younger Jamaicans, who had once felt distant from national politics, became newly awakened to issues of land rights, sovereignty, and transparency. A growing movement began calling for a national review of all agreements affecting land, water, minerals, and energy. And then came the question that rolled across the island like an undying refrain. If we do not protect our land, who will? Family sorrow can break a nation, but it can also remake it. Out of disappointment grows determination. Out of exposure grows clarity. And out of broken systems grows the possibility of rebirth. Jamaica, though shaken, began to imagine a path forward, one shaped not by secrecy, but by unity, not by regret, but by resolve. But the consequences did not stop at Jamaica's shores. International observers began commenting on the matter. The African Union expressed interest. American analysts wondered whether transparency movements would spread across the Caribbean. Caribbean scholars quietly discussed whether this incident might inspire regional reform. And yet, for all the global attention, one truth remained. The next step belonged to Jamaica alone. The nation now faced a crossroads. Would it confront its shadowed past? Or would it retreat into silence, hoping the turmoil would fade? Before we go further, family, I need to ask you directly. Do you believe Jamaica should publish every hidden foreign contract from the last 20 years? And do you believe this revelation will strengthen or weaken the Caribbean's future? Because as Jamaica wrestled with those questions, the world began forming opinions of its own, and some of those opinions carried heavy consequences. Across the ocean, in cities where Caribbean and African American histories intertwine, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, the news from Jamaica spread through community halls, barbershops, elder centers, and Sunday congregations. It did not arrive as gossip. It arrived as concern. Because whenever a small black nation is pulled into the shadow of secrecy, elders in the diaspora feel it in their bones. American newspapers picked up the story quickly. The Atlanta Black Star ran a headline questioning the implications for regional sovereignty. The Washington Post published a cautious editorial suggesting that Jamaica's situation could reflect a broader global trend. Smaller nations entering agreements under conditions that the public never fully sees. Though details remained incomplete, the interest was unmistakable. In academic circles, the conversation deepened. Scholars from Howard University, the University of the West Indies, Lagos University, and the University of Cape Town participated in panel discussions, drawing parallels between Jamaica's revelations and similar struggles faced by nations across Africa and the global South. One professor from Howard remarked, "Transparency is not merely a democratic luxury. It is a survival mechanism for nations with painful histories of foreign pressure." Meanwhile, media outlets in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya observed the unfolding drama closely. Many African commentators expressed sympathy, noting that their own countries had faced questionable agreements involving minerals, land, or infrastructure. A Kenyan journalist commented on television, "Jamaica is not alone. We are witnessing a global pattern in which the powerful shape the destinies of the small." In Europe, interest came from a different angle. Analysts in Brussels speculated on the geopolitical ripples that might emerge if Jamaica chose full transparency. Would other Caribbean nations follow? Would African nations push for greater openness? Would these movements challenge long-standing financial relationships? CARICOM, though measured, called for respect for sovereignty and accountability. The African Union issued a diplomatic note stating that truth should strengthen, not weaken, international partnerships. Subtle messages, but meaningful. Family, in moments like these, the world does not simply watch, it measures. It measures a nation's strength. It measures a nation's resolve. And it measures whether a nation is willing to face itself. Some international commentators praised Jamaica for initiating an internal review, noting it as a sign of maturity. Others questioned why such a review had not occurred earlier. Even within Jamaica's diaspora, opinions diverged. Some elders feared repercussions for tourism or investment. Others insisted that truth, once revealed, would bring more respect than silence ever could. Yet, as global attention increased, pressure on Jamaican leadership intensified. Diplomats exchanged cautious statements. Ambassadors met behind closed doors. The world was circling not aggressively, but attentively. It was as though every capital from Washington to Pretoria was leaning in, waiting to see whether Jamaica would step into the light or retreat into old habits. And beneath this international scrutiny lay a deeper, quieter tension. How would larger powers respond if Jamaica chose full transparency? Would the truth strengthen alliances or strain them? Family, the world's gaze may bring clarity, but it also brings consequence. Because the question now standing before Jamaica under the weight of global eyes was simple, yet immense. What path will the island choose next? Family, when a nation stands at a crossroads, it does not hear only the voices of politicians. It hears the voices of its ancestors. It hears the warnings of its elders. It hears the silent, steady heartbeat of its people. And in the days following Jamaica's revelation, that heartbeat grew louder, clearer, more insistent than anything coming from Gordon House. For Jamaica now faced three paths. The first path was silence, a return to the familiar, a quiet filing away of documents, a polished statement to calm the public, a promise that everything was under control. Some in leadership believed this would protect stability. Some feared that too much transparency could ignite economic or diplomatic friction. Yet elders across the island rejected this path. "Silence is how trouble begins," one grandmother in Trelawney said. "If we hide today, we will bury our children in the same darkness tomorrow." The second path was revelation. Full transparency. A public release of every foreign agreement signed in the past 2 decades. This path frightened some officials, but it stirred hope in the hearts of the people. Universities advocated for it. Churches prayed for it. Diaspora communities demanded it. A retired pastor in Montego Bay spoke with fire in his voice. "A nation cannot heal until it looks at every wound." But this path came with risk international partners might resist, and internal divisions could widen before they narrowed. The third path was transformation, a future in which no contract, no agreement, no strategic decision could be made without public oversight. A system where the people, especially elders, communities, and civil institutions, would hold a guiding role. This was not merely transparency, it was rebirth. It was the kind of reform that Caribbean nations had spoken about for generations, but seldom enacted. The path required courage. It required humility, and it required leadership willing to recognize past mistakes and walk boldly into something new. Across Jamaica, the conversation shifted, not what happened, but what must happen now. Youth organizations called for a sovereignty forum. Religious leaders held unity services. Retired civil servants published articles urging stronger accountability laws. And in the diaspora, African American elders expressed a deep, historic longing. Let Jamaica stand tall. Let the Caribbean rise with dignity. Let these islands show the world that small nations can make mighty choices. Hope, slow, steady, powerful, began to grow. For the first time, Jamaicans from different political colors spoke a shared language. Nation first, people first, truth first. And many began to believe that this crisis, painful as it was, might become a turning point, a cleansing, a clearing, a restoration of trust between leaders and the eled. Yet even as hope rose, one reality remained. The nation had not yet announced its choice. Would it keep the past sealed? Would it open everything? Would it build a new future from the ashes of an old mistake? Family. Jamaica now stood on the threshold of history, one step away from a decision that could echo from Mandeville to Brooklyn, from Kingston to Accra. Because the world was waiting, the diaspora was watching, and Jamaica beautiful, wounded, rising Jamaica was just about to choose its path. Family, we have walked through shadows together. We have stood in the silence of sealed envelopes, in the tremble of revelation, in the sorrow of realizing that something sacred may have been handled without the people's consent. But now, at the end of this journey, I ask you to breathe slowly, deeply as we look ahead. For Jamaica stands not in defeat, but in possibility. Across this island, across the diaspora, across the Atlantic itself, something powerful has awakened. Elders from Kingston to Chicago have said it plainly. We have seen enough secrets. It is time for nations of Black heritage to stand in the light. And that truth, spoken with dignity, is the beginning of a new chapter. This entire story, every whisper, every document, every argument has reminded us of one thing. Sovereignty cannot live in darkness. It breathes only where truth walks freely. When Captain Traoré spoke, many dismissed it as noise. But for millions of elders, it was an Ibrahim Traoré momentum moment that forced hidden questions to surface, a moment that traveled across oceans and unsettled the comfortable. And when Jamaicans saw the global debate it created, they witnessed the Ibrahim Traoré reaction unfold in real time. A chorus of voices demanding integrity from leaders everywhere. Family, hear me now. This does not have to be a wound. This can become a doorway to transparency, a doorway to unity, a doorway to a Caribbean and African future built not on silence, but on strength. Imagine a Jamaica where every citizen knows exactly how their land, their water, their minerals, and their sovereignty are treated. Imagine a Caribbean where elders no longer fear decisions taken behind closed doors. Imagine a future where Africa and the islands walk side by side, open, honest, accountable, unbroken. This is why many say we are witnessing the second Ibrahim Traoré moment, not born in Burkina Faso this time, but rising inside Jamaica itself. A moment in which a nation realizes that truth, even when painful, is a blessing. Before we close, let me ask you, not as a narrator, but as family. Do you believe Jamaica will choose transparency? Do you believe this moment will strengthen the Caribbean for generations to come? And what should the diaspora demand next from every leader, in every nation? Share your thoughts below, because every comment becomes part of the healing, part of the record, part of the future. And family, before you go, let me speak plainly from the heart. If this message stirred something in your spirit, do not leave without subscribing. Share this video with one elder who still believes that truth matters. Stand with us. Walk with us. Rise with us. The story is not finished. The future is calling, and Jamaica is ready to answer.